Disappointing or not overall, it seems like the Hawkeyes never lose their touch when it comes to finishing off Nebraska to close it out. We appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. Iowa Live. Corey, Brad, and myself get together every Tuesday, 5 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. where it counts. We always appreciate you stopping by. Leave those comments, questions there in the chat. Just do all the right things. Please like the video. You can share it out on social media and subscribe here at the Voice of College Football. But for the daily diet of Iowa athletics, of course, join Corey from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Corey, how you doing today?
I'm doing good. I mean, I'm a little under the weather, to be quite honest, but that's kind of fall. I don't know about you down in Florida. You guys probably don't get sick down there, but you kind of get a little under the weather when you have to deal with
sick.
The weather changes up here in the Midwest can do that. Sure. But hey, life could be worse. And Iowa's coming off a win, nice win to finish the season. They finished the year at 8-4. Stop me if you've heard that record before. And so we can talk about that, but yeah, no, things are good. And the men's basketball, they open their Big Ten season tonight. They're undefeated. They'll play Tom Izzo's Michigan State Spartans. So they basically start at the top.
That is something that I have not lost track of. I see that Michigan State, as they typically do, in half of the last 20 plus years under Tom Izzo, have played plenty of difficult non-conference games. I saw one against North Carolina, one against somebody else. Just a few days before that. So they like to toughen them up there at Michigan State in the preseason on the hard court.
And they get Duke on Saturday. So they get Iowa today and then Duke on Saturday. So
is that the Big Ten Challenge?
I don't know.
The ACC Big Ten Challenge.
That doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist.
That stopped being played like 3 or 4 years ago. They got rid of the Big Ten ACC Challenge.
Well,
there really isn't I don't really know that there is. They did the Big Ten Big East thing for a while, but I don't know if that technically exists. I guess Iowa played Xavier earlier this year, so maybe that qualifies. But they got rid of that challenge, unfortunately. But
that was a big deal.
It was, and the only thing I don't like about how these powers, it seems like every year now, Michigan State plays North Carolina, Kentucky plays Duke, Duke plays North Carolina, Duke plays Kentucky, Duke plays Michigan State. Like Kansas plays Kentucky, Kansas plays Michigan State, and there's some really good programs there, but I don't know. I get a little bored with those matchups over and over and over again. But, this is – I don't want to make this about men's basketball, but Iowa has not played a real difficult schedule, but they've passed every test they've had so far. Beat a good mid-major early in the year in Southeast Missouri, and then they took down Xavier, took down Ole Miss, played a Grand Canyon team that is good every year and just beat Utah. So, but you're going 0-60, having to play in East Lansing.
Back to football and what Iowa accomplished on Saturday in Lincoln is really no small feat when you consider the domination and that Nebraska is a fairly talented team. They're dysfunctional. They continue to be. There is a stark contrast between these two teams, i.e. more so the two programs, folks, being more the overall structure of the entire program, the coaching staff, of course, the head coach, and how the entire program's run versus that particular year's team. But we saw it on full display once against Corey, because from a talent perspective, if you went out and took these guys out and you basically measured their athleticism, obviously the recruiting rankings, all those things, there would be little difference between the two teams. There was no difference between the two teams in terms of record in the standings going into the game at 7-4, 7-4. However, we were both pretty comfortable that Iowa was the superior team. Now, I did not predict them to win the game by 24 points, but I never blinked in regards to selecting who would win the game. And certainly Iowa continues to win, unless they are overwhelmed by a talent disadvantage, usually come through when it comes to playing the game the right way, not making mistakes, playing in the clutch, doing the right things, versus the complete contrast of that, which is Nebraska, which folded once again.
Yep. And you've been talking about it since week 0, really. I remember calling into your show after the Nebraska-Cincinnati game, and I said, look, that was a great start to the college football season, but those look like two average teams at best. And, what's Cincinnati now? Are they finished 9-3?
7-5.
7-5. Okay, yeah. So they
Yeah.
slid a little bit. Yeah. So those are basically identical teams. So both Nebraska and Cincinnati both finished at 7-5. So it's exactly what we kind of saw in that early season game that looked like it, just a great game because you have all these crazy fans. But that's what Nebraska is. They have insane fans. They're passionate. They love their team. But it's the most dysfunctional program that I can imagine at this level that has this much invested into the sport and has the support of this many fans. It's unbelievable, and it transcends the coaching staff. It transcends who the head man is. It transcends who the coordinators are. I mean, perfect. I know this is just sort of anecdotal, but it sort of is a microcosm of the whole issue with Nebraska. They can't beat Iowa. They just can't beat Iowa consistently. They won they've won one in the last what 10 years now or 9 years. No, 10.
11.
I'm sorry. 11. Yeah, they haven't beaten Iowa. They beat Iowa one time since 2014, that 2014 win over Iowa. They can't beat Iowa. And I say that not to make fun of Nebraska, but I'm simply using that as evidence of what you just said. Iowa is the epitome of consistent. Say what you want about Kirk Ferentz. And most of the time, the game's close, but it doesn't matter most of the time. 99% of the time, it doesn't matter. In this case, Iowa blew them out. They blew them out in 2017. They blew them out in 2016. This is not a good football program right now. They're just not. They're okay. They played a very weak schedule and got to 7-5. But and as far as the Iowa thing is concerned, I mean, we talked extensively on the post-game show with Matt Kroll and with Coach Patterson. I'll just say this about Iowa. It's easy to say this in hindsight, but I think it's fair now to look back and say that Michigan State game was just a bad day. It was just a one-off. And most teams, not all teams, the elites don't always experience this, but most even good teams to above good teams, they have a bad day at times. But oftentimes those good teams still find a way to win. And that's what Iowa did second to last game of the season against Michigan State. It was a horrible performance. Michigan State's not very good. They just fired their head coach. But Iowa found a way. And this past weekend, it looked really good. It felt good. I know Iowa, fans are, some fans are living in the what if mode, which they're going to be living in that for a while. I had somebody, I think it was on one of the YouTube videos, or maybe it was a post game, post a comment after the actual stream was posted on YouTube that basically said, this is one of the biggest what if seasons that I can recall. And so, yeah, it's a what if. If you look back at it, it's easy to see it that way. It is a what if season, but where does it rank with the other what if seasons? 2010 could be considered a what if season. 2009 is a what if season because of how it ended with Ricky Stanzi's injury. 2008 is a what if season because they lost 4 games by a total of 12 points, which is basically what they did this year. The difference is 2008 led into a great 2009 group, and maybe 2026 will be a great Iowa group. But I don't know that I'm as confident in that because there's so much movement. They don't have a quarterback next year yet. They did lose a quarterback this week. Jackson Stratton entered the transfer portal, which I don't think is a bad thing at all. So that opens up a spot theoretically. I wouldn't be surprised if Ryan Fitzgerald enters the portal and goes to play for his dad at Michigan State. We'll see. But yeah, I mean, I see Hawkeye Howard in the chat. I appreciate Hawkeye Howard being a loyal watcher, listener, whatnot of this show and my show over a number of years. He says he grades the season as a C+ as of now. Some may go higher, some may go lower. I mean, I don't think it's almost unfair nowadays to put a blanket success versus not success label on seasons like this, because I do think beauty's in the eye of the beholder. And we've been saying that with Iowa for years, but even more so now in this day and age of college football. I don't think 8-4 is a success, but I don't think it's a failure. I think it's somewhere in between. A 7-5 would have been a failure, I believe, but they didn't get to. They got to 8-4, and they were very close to better. I think the good news, if this is any solidification, is had they beaten USC, not enough things went right this past weekend to where Iowa would have been in contention for a 9-3 at-large spot, right, Mark? Like that win against USC would not have made a difference, in the big picture. Now 2 wins would have made a difference, but they didn't get to 2 wins. So, it's going to be an interesting. I don't want to call it a rebuild, but every year is a rebuild now with the portal. It's going to be interesting what they do at quarterback. Going to be interesting to see what they do up front on the offensive line. Do they, they've really not had much success going out and get transfer portal offensive linemen. We really didn't see Bryce George at all this year. He was an All-American at Ferris State. Thought he was going to come in and be the starting left tackle. Never made it there. And Trevor Lauck had a nice year. But, man, do they have somebody to replace Logan Jones and Jennings Dunker? Those are some big shoes to fill. So that's going to be a storyline. And then, of course, there's just, there's pieces to fill in on the defensive line, pieces to fill in at linebacker. And so much of this is dependent on the portal nowadays. It's less on development. So we'll see. And tomorrow's signing day. So we got a new class coming in, a couple of guys who I think have a chance to play right away. But that's Iowa football.
So I recall all the teams that you just mentioned that had what if close but no cigar type of seasons, but I don't remember them as closely as you do. This one, obviously, we just experienced, but I do believe that this one is different in that Iowa State turned out to be a decent team, an okay team, maybe not quite as good as I thought they were going to be, but still a good team, 8-4. But the other three teams, and I know USC is not going to go to the playoff, but they might have the best offense in college football. They've got one of the top 5. And the entire team's really good. They have one of the 15 best teams in America. And the other two teams are 2 of the 5 or 6 best teams in America. And all 3 of those games were that close. Pick a play, 1 play, 2 plays, and Iowa turns it into a victory. And obviously, it's a completely different season. We're sitting here talking about going to a Big Ten championship game, or at least being an at-large team that is safely in the playoff, maybe ranked 8th or 9th in the country, and everything's good. We'll just have to wait to see what the seeding looks like, and if they play a home game in the playoffs.
And I think this team can compete in the playoffs. I'm not saying they're going to win games, but I think they've proven it. They've proven it against Indiana, against Oregon, against USC. Now if they played Ohio State tomorrow, if they played Indiana there, maybe it wouldn't be all that close. I don't know, but I think they've proven. Unlike 2015 would have been, you could also call that a what if year because of one play, right? One drive for Michigan State in the Big Ten title game. I think what takes away from that ending is the fact that then Michigan State got walloped by Alabama. Iowa got walloped by Stanford. So it kind of took us back to earth. Like, this team was pretty good, but played an average schedule, and they were opportunistic, but probably don't have the horses. And so I don't know about 2009 is, that's the year because they went on to beat Georgia Tech. It was really good. Ran the triple option back in that was the 2010 Orange Bowl. That Iowa team would have been interesting to see. What would have happened, Mark? You remember 2009 if they had beaten? So let's just say for this argument that they would have taken down Northwestern at home. They were up 10 when Stanzi got hurt in that game. And then say they did go on the road and beat Ohio State the next week. And they almost did it without Stanzi. They almost did it with Vandenberg. We took them to overtime. So they win out. They beat Minnesota the final week of the year. At 12-0, would they have been in the BCS National Championship at 12-0?
It would be a crying shame, but most likely not, because there were 2 undefeated teams playing in the national championship game that were highly thought of, Alabama and Texas.
Yeah.
And that would be a travesty. So
you
would have the consolation, Corey, of the voice of college football, revisitation of the history books and giving Iowa a partial national championship.
Well,
and I'm being serious because they would have earned it. They would have earned because they would not have been given a opportunity.
That would have been such a weird result. I'm not glad that Stanzi got hurt, but it wouldn't have been just, like you said, an absolute travesty. And that would have been the biggest what if year in the history of Iowa football. If they went 12-0, maybe they win the Rose Bowl, but they don't get a chance to play for a national title. That would have really stunk. But, that's why we have the expanded playoff. You don't have to be 12-0 anymore, or better than 12-0, I guess. But, man, hey, I'll tell you this. This coaching carousel, I know we're going to talk about it next hour for the Big Ten show, and maybe I'm living in the moment, but boy, there's some good coaches being added to this conference. And I just think it makes everything that much harder to win. I just Pat Fitzgerald. I was an advocate for him at Penn State job. We'll see if has there been anything made official about Penn State and the BYU guy? I know there was a lot of talk on that, and it sounds like BYU was trying to counter and make a last ditch pitch.
So the last thing I saw on social media right before you jumped on, and it seemed to be coming from an official, somewhat reliable source, was that Kalani Sitake was about to inform his players in BYU that he is staying.
Ooh, ooh. So then, what does Penn State do? Do they have a backup plan there, Mark? Because
Well, they
there's some people
better. They should.
there. I know, but there are some people off the board. There are some big name coaches off the board.
Yeah, and they were the first, maybe not technically the first, but they were the first huge program to have a vacancy. So they should have been working on this for a long time.
And boy, I mean, can we agree Michigan State hiring Pat, that's a slam dunk hire? And honestly, I was very critical of UCLA when they hired Deshaun Foster, but they just got a guy, James Madison, who's, I'm not going to say he's the next Cignetti because we don't know that, but boy, he really kept, you're talking about a guy in Cignetti who's proven his worth. He leaves the program, and what does this new guy do? He comes in and basically keeps James Madison in the national conversation as a G5. So it's really impressive. I think that's a really good hire on paper. And then who am I missing? There was someone else.
In the Big Ten? In the Big Ten, there would be, well, I know who should have been fired is Mike Loxley.
I was just going to bring
why he still has a job. So Jonathan Smith, they're standing across from each other all afternoon on Saturday, and Jonathan Smith's Michigan State team wins the game. And I'm not promoting Jonathan Smith as having done a great job at Michigan State, but 2 seasons versus 6 seasons.
What is
and they're
Michael
basically
Loxley
in the same spot?
What is Loxley doing at Maryland that is keeping him there? I don't understand what he's doing. Like you said, it's 6 years. What's he on the verge of?
His last 2 seasons have been horrendous.
And he's never had a great season. He's had okay to good seasons, right? Especially playing in the Big Ten East.
8-5 once.
Yeah, 8-5 once.
7
and they always play weak non-conference schedules, right? Even back then, they're playing weak. So, it's but boy, yeah, Sitake, if he ends up going to Penn State, which sounds like there's some doubt there, Pat Fitzgerald, and then what's the UCLA coach?
Bob Chesney.
Chesney, yeah. Oof. There's some good coaches in this league now, and I guess Michael Loxley would be the next one, and then after that, man, I think Schiano had a rough year. Looking back, I don't think he's on the hot seat. I think PJ, one more. If he has a year next year that's below average, then they should be looking for a new head coach. That's my opinion. But the league is tough. That's no news, but a couple of the weak programs just got stronger with these hires.
Did this 8-4 finish fall in line with your preseason prediction?
I had them. I had them hitting the over. I think the line was 7.5 preseason. I had them hitting the over. I had them at 9-3.
Okay.
The only miss that I had was, let's see. Well, I'd have to look back. I don't want to misquote myself, but I think I had them beating Iowa State. I think, but I may have flipped a couple. But yeah, I had them at 9-3, and they were, like you said, a play away on a couple of fronts.
I was at 8-4, so I nailed it this year. But that's one of those that if you're going to pick a team, if you're going to tell me, you know what, your life's on the line during the off season, and you can pick one college football team, and you've got to hit their record exactly right, I would probably take Iowa because there would be less variation than almost any other team in the country, unless I wanted to go top end. I would either go Iowa or I'd say Ohio State. Those would be probably the 2 schools I would go after.
Don't they always hit the over though?
But I didn't pick Ohio State to go 12-0. They seem to, don't they?
They do. Every year we look at that and we're like, that seems low. I would take the over, and every year we're right. I don't know. I don't know why Vegas doesn't ever fluctuate on that. It seems like, but hey, I saw the Old Dominion quarterback. I mean, I guess nobody can officially enter the portal right now, but it's official that he's going to. I don't know. Have there been other big names that have hit the portal at quarterback so far, Mark? There will be
Not
other
that I
guys that
know of.
enter, but it's going to be very intriguing to see what Iowa can do at that position. Because now that Stratton's gone, I know that you would have said regardless they had to hit the portal, but now they've already lost 2 quarterbacks, Gronowski, Stratton. They add one in this kid that was previously committed to Boise State. He's going to be signing tomorrow. And then how about this? This is a Hawkeye note. Cash Herrera, a former Iowa commit who flipped to Indiana. He decommitted from Indiana last week. And after a visit to Boise State, he's now committed to Boise State. So they've literally just Iowa, because Herrera decommitted from Iowa then flipped the Boise State commit. And then Boise State flipped Cash Herrera back from Indiana. Hey, a kid who makes 3 different college choices, I know it's a big decision, but that might be an indication. If you do that even before you get to your school, that might be an indication that maybe stability is not quite there in that young man's life yet. Like he's not real. I don't know. I don't know what it means. I shouldn't speculate, but my guess is Kirk and the staff are happy that they got Traden Bessinger from Boise.
While we're talking about our evaluation of the season and whether it was a disappointment or not, I will fall in the same classification as you in terms of, I don't think you can call that a failure. I hate to be that extreme. It's not a failure, especially considering, to me, the performance. Had they gone 8-4 and they got their doors blown off by those 4 teams, I consider that. Now, maybe that's less disappointing. Maybe that becomes more disappointing because it's so close. But they were in every game to the end. The performance was right there. So to me, it's more disappointing than it being anything close to a failure. But did they didn't exceed my expectations. They pretty much hit my expectations, obviously, from a record standpoint. Now, I would have thought that they would have been handled by one of those teams. The probabilities going into the season would have been that Penn State or Oregon or going out to USC, one of those teams would have handled them pretty well, 34-14 or something like that. But that didn't happen. So they were, just that close. There was a post that I sent you, and I was looking for it and could not find it. But somebody had posted on social media, and this caused people to weigh in with their opinions on both sides. And I see both sides of this, where I believe the roll call is, since the college football playoff was instituted in 2014, so we're talking about now 12 seasons, Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, Michigan, Clemson, Iowa are the only teams to have won 8 games every season. Take out 2020, obviously. And then the comments roll in, of course. And there's obviously a distinction. There's obviously an outlier there. So I have no issue with attacking that from both sides. I think from the negative side, no, you cannot put Iowa in the classification of those other programs during that course of time, because they didn't compete at the level and compete for national championships and win a ton of conference championships and play at the winning. Like, if we would post winning percentage next to those, they wouldn't be close. But statistically, it's true. And statistically, it's true because it also speaks to the consistency, that there's been no letdown, and the program and the team, credit Kirk to start, but also the coaching staff. Phil Parker, of course, has been there the entire time, that they have consistently been at least good during that time.
High floor, low ceiling. I mean, that's what you're looking at. And yeah, that stat, I know that stat bothers you to some extent.
It doesn't bother me. I'm just bringing clarification.
Well, you just don't like Iowa being thrown into. I mean, here's what's crazy. Like what you just said, that they're, one of how many teams that has won 8 games over this course of this time. They're also like, they have been under Kirk, one of like 10 teams that have an X number of players on active rosters in the NFL. So, And so you look at that and you're like, well, they're in a handful with Clemson, with Florida, with Ohio State, with USC. So they're in the mix with all those programs for player development too, Mark. So what does that tell us? Either A, Iowa's just consistently developing good, not great NFL players, which is translating to good, not great seasons at the college level, or they are actually underperforming their level of development. Because they do have some great players in the NFL. Now, if you were to rank, like give a score rating next to every Iowa NFL player versus every Clemson NFL player or every Ohio State NFL player, would Iowa's rating probably be lower? Yes. But if it wasn't, then you'd have to look at that and say, okay, as great as Iowa's been, either they're not balanced enough with where they're really good, but you could probably make that argument. Like they produce a ton of tight ends, but they don't produce any quarterbacks, any receivers. Okay, we can have that discussion. That's part of the problem. Or again, they're just not performing as well as they're developing, but they are still performing well to a point where they don't drop to a certain point, or they don't go up to a certain point, if that makes sense.
I would give it this nuance, which is somewhat in agreement, but somewhat different, that we would have to look at we'll take Ohio State. We'd have to take all of Ohio State's NFL players versus Iowa's current NFL players. But off the top of my head, I don't think there's a great distinction about how good they are in the NFL. I think it's just Ohio State has more. Therefore, that speaks to them producing better talent and winning more games at the collegiate level. But I don't think Ohio State has just a zillion superstars in the NFL and Iowa's guys are barely hanging on to rosters. I think it's actually pretty close.
But not every player, not every position is as important as the next position.
Sure.
And it's a fact that Ohio State has produced a bunch of really good quarterbacks, really good receivers. Those are two positions Iowa hasn't sniffed success at. So those are two major variables that are just totally different. And maybe there is some explanation there. Like if you took some of the tight ends out of the NFL and put them as receivers, now Iowa's producing receivers instead of some of these tight ends, maybe Iowa would have some more, national success. I don't know. I mean, this is Tim Lester's job now to go out and figure out a way to improve the passing game. They looked pretty good at times on Saturday, which surprised me, Mark, heading into that game against Nebraska. And I brought this stat up to Coach Patterson post-game. Heading into the game against Nebraska, did you realize Nebraska had, by the numbers, they had the second best pass defense in the country? Nebraska did, in the country, for fewest yards allowed to an opposing quarterback. They had several games this year in Big Ten play where they held opposing quarterbacks to under 100 yards passing. Jaden Mayava is one of those quarterbacks. He was 9 of 23 against Nebraska.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I was just really surprised. I'm not saying Iowa, threw for 500 yards. That's not what I'm applying. I think Gronowski finished $170 or something. But that's what they wanted. They didn't want to throw for. They executed really well in the play action as the game went on, and they weren't great conditions. It was very cold. He had an early drop from Sam Phillips, which derailed that initial drive. That could have easily been a drive where
it was a good pass breakup. You could argue either way.
Okay. Did you watch the whole game? I'm assuming you did.
I did. I love that game.
Hey, what did you think?
I love watching Iowa and Nebraska play on Black Friday. I always watch that game.
It was a great game, and I was down. Well, for Iowa fans, I was down by where the fumble happened. What did you think of that series where Nebraska fields the ball, fumbles it out of bounds, but they have a flag on Iowa, right? They have a flag on Iowa, so Nebraska wants Iowa to repunt. They repunt. The return guy muffs the punt, then picks it up, and Shire just smacks him, and the ball goes flying into the end zone. Now, there are people on the Nebraska side who are yelling that was targeting. You were saying it was targeting?
I think it was targeting.
It was hard because
his helmet and rammed it right into the returner's helmet.
Well, it kind of grazed the face mask. It was a hard hit, but I don't know. Again, I guess we can go look up the definition of targeting again. He was not defenseless. No. He was not defenseless. And he did definitely hit some helmet to helmet, but it wasn't, it didn't look like he launched. It looked like he did lower his head though. That's what he did.
And he actually knocked the ball out with his helmet as well.
Well, that's what I'm saying though. He knocked the ball out with his helmet. He wasn't going head to head trying to
No, he like went head to head and then he lowered and knocked the
I
ball
mean,
right out of his. It was a
I
great
would.
hit. And I
Is it?
usually
Yeah.
come to the defense of the defender or the tackler in that, but based on the rule, I just didn't know how that was not called targeting.
I will say I loved being in Memorial Stadium for this game because I'd never
Yeah,
been there, and I actually had some really nice Nebraska fans behind me that were very, very cordial. And I'm pretty. I shouldn't say I'm docile, but I try to respect being in a road venue. And I was there as a fan. I wasn't in the press box. I was there in the stadium. And so surrounded by red, and we moved over to one of the big Iowa sections at the end because of course, they collected the trophy and came over and did the fight song there, which is always a pleasure to watch. But yeah, I mean, how about DJ Vanami? Man, he might be the next great Iowa tight end. We thought it was going to be Addison Estrenga. He got hurt. Zach Ortworth looked like he was in position, but man, DJ has been the guy, and he's still a redshirt freshman, so he's got a chance to be the next great Iowa tight end. And obviously, whoever the quarterback is next year, that's going to be a big part of this. But I guess the one thing I take away from the last 12 games, because I really did take pleasure in watching Mark Gronowski this year, even though it wasn't perfect. And the numbers say he wasn't great through the air. Mark, what are you laughing at? Why you got to laugh at it?
I,
Listen, I really did
I'm
take
not.
pleasure.
No, I
I
think
did.
that's great. I love how you are able to combine your growing up and continued fandom of Iowa football, but still be very objective and treat it professionally. I think that's amazing. And you have just stated that a number of times, and I did catch some of the post game, and I heard you stated on there as well that you just enjoyed watching Mark.
I have. And I'll
Wait,
say this: the reason I bring it up, Mark, is because yes, I've thought about this a lot over the last few days. What our conversation last week absolutely rings true and remains the same. I I think a lot of Iowa fans, maybe I'm more so in this boat than others. I have a hard time not weighing him against what Iowa has had at
sure,
quarterback.
yeah,
And like the numbers say he was a much better passer.
yeah.
So that's what the numbers say, and that's just
Mhm.
passing. And then you add the element of his legs. So collectively, you can kind of see where I come from when I say, "Boy, it's been a breath of fresh air." But I think with the level of play calling that they have now with Tim Lester, they've had better playmakers. They had an opportunity to be even better, and Mark was not always good enough. Oftentimes, was not good enough to help them get to that place. Now, it's also a fact that had he stayed healthy for the entirety of the Indiana game, maybe they win that one. But it's also a fact that they won a couple of games down the stretch this year, in part due to Mark Gronowski. Penn State was a last-second win. Michigan State was a last-second win. What I'll say moving forward, I don't know who they're going to target, but I just hope they do go get somebody with good legs again. I don't think Tim Lester, I think he values having a guy who can move, clearly. And Bo Perbula, by the way, can move as well. I don't think he's as good of a runner as Mark Gronowski, but he was the other guy that Iowa was in on late. But I just hope they don't swing the pendulum in the opposite direction, because they did. I'm sure Tim agrees that they left a lot of passes out there. So they need somebody with a good arm. And I know those are hard to come by, guys with really good arms and really good legs, but they are out there. And I just really, to me, what we saw this year with an improved offense, it wasn't reflected completely with the passing numbers, but as a whole, it adds so much of an extra dimension having a guy you can run design QB runs for, and who can scramble and make plays with his legs. That's what we saw to Mark Gronowski at his best this year. It was big moments on third down. They get his design QB run. On Friday, I'll say this about Mark. I didn't think he played the best early. I thought he was pretty good overall in the game, Mark, with his arm. Can we agree on that? I think he was pretty good. It was
Mhm.
one of his better games through the air.
Yeah.
But boy, he was scrambling. I mean, he looked impressive, just evading pressure. And he had at least one big play down to DJ Vanami because of his ability to escape pressure. I think it was like the 40-yard bomb down that I'm going through a press box, top left sideline, east sideline, whatever it would be. Again, his ability to escape was huge. So, and he did the same against Iowa State. I mean, how many games this year did we see him run for 8, 10, 12 times in a game? And I mean, it's just something that we're talking Deacon Hill, Spencer Petras, and even Nate Stanley was not mobile at all. Those are the guys. And Cade McNamara, I mean, he was more mobile before his last injury, but at that point it was nothing there. And by the way, shout out Brendan Sullivan. His career, I think, just ended at Tulane this past weekend. I watched that whole game. Don't ask me why. I watched all of Tulane and Charlotte. I got a buddy of mine who plays for one of those two teams, but also had to watch Johnny Pascuzzi, who plays a lot for Tulane. But Brendan Sullivan was hardly used this year at Tulane. I mean, they brought him into the field on Saturday they lined up both quarterbacks in the backfield and faked a handoff to Sullivan and then threw to the opposite side of the field, and then he just ran off. So I say that in that, like, that's what he was very mobile, but apparently his arm talent isn't even good enough to get him on the field at Tulane. And that quarterback, you may know who I'm talking about, his name escapes me. The starter for Tulane, he didn't look very good on Saturday against a really bad Charlotte team. So I don't know what his season stats are, but it just tells me that they have been so bad at quarterback. And we knew that, but they've been so bad at quarterback since 2020. And I'm excited to see. And then what's this thing with Lincoln? Where we were, Fisherman in the chat says Lincoln Keenholz would be a good fit. Are we back on the Lincoln Keenholz to Iowa train? Remember, that's been a rumor. Yeah. What's he doing? Is he at Ohio State?
Yes.
What is he doing? Does he just not want to play?
Quarterback.
Does he just not want to play?
He is the backup quarterback at Ohio State. He may win a national championship.
What year? Okay, but nobody
as a backup quarterback. He gets to play a little mop up.
So what is his classification? Is he a junior?
He must be.
I'm looking here on Ohio State
he's
website.
Probably
yes.
Going to be a junior. No, he's a junior now.
He's a junior right now.
That's so right. He did play in the 2023 season. Yeah.
But that's interesting because if he didn't play in more than 4 games, though, did he?
No.
That's interesting. It doesn't say anything about. I'm assuming he's a redshirt junior. I have to think. I'm not finding that here, but don't you think he'll probably enter the portal?
I thought that they were going to have portal additions last year. Well, they did. They lost their starting. The guy that was competing, Devin Brown, went to Cal, but then he didn't win the job.
That's interesting. I'm looking up so he was part of the 2023 class. Lincoln Keenholz was, and in 2023, let's see how many games he played. He says he played in 3 games, and then 2 games last year. So it's interesting that Ohio State lists him as a junior. By my count, he's a redshirt sophomore. But regardless, if I'm not mistaken, that means he has 2 years in front of him still. So this is probably the time to hop in the portal. And I don't know. I mean, don't you think logic would tell us, because Sayan's going to be back, right?
Yeah,
Sayan will be back.
Freshman, a redshirt freshman.
Freshman. But he could go after next year. Sayan could declare after next year. Yeah. But the reason I bring up Keenholz is if he goes into the portal, just by name alone, by the school he played at, the fact that he was the backup, he's probably going to have a ridiculous number of suitors. Like, there are going to be some major programs after him. Is that fair?
Yeah, he could be a good quarterback.
Yeah.
He's a runner, too. He can run.
It will be interesting to see if Iowa goes after somebody like Keenholz, because there were rumblings of that last season.
Now, if we had a production staff to pull these clips, you remember, and I'm not saying you disagreed with me, but how many times did I say when they were in the portal, why don't they go get a running or a quarterback that's capable of running? Because they haven't had that. And that's an easy way to improve a pedestrian offense, to have a guy that can pick you up a couple first downs that you otherwise wouldn't get.
Well, they did it, didn't they? I mean, Gronowski was a good fit.
Sure.
His arm just wasn't quite as good as it was at South Dakota State. I mean, it's just whether it's the surgery or I don't know what it is, but he was a very good fit. And like I say, I'm not going to repeat it again because you'll just start laughing. But you know how I felt about him this year. And I think he's going to play in the bowl game. I don't think he's going to hurt. Like, he's not a guy who can do any damage by playing. If anything, he can help his draft stock.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know where he's projected. I know before he transferred to Iowa, there were mock drafts that had him 6th, 7th round. My guess is he's projected right now as an undrafted free agent. But if he were to go out and really look good with his arm in a bowl game, you know, another month removed from the shoulder operation, maybe there'd be a team that takes a late flyer on him, kind of like the Niners did with Brock Purdy. But and I don't know, like I've also thought with him, given his legs, could he be good enough, athletic enough to change positions at the next level
and be a tight end?
I don't know what else
That's
he would
what he
be.
would have to be.
If he wasn't a tight end, what else? Wouldn't that be crazy? Iowa produces Mark Gronowski, tight end in the NFL.
Yeah.
By the way, saw Parker Hesse at the Iowa-Michigan State game. He was sitting right above us. I guess he's no longer on a team. He'd been playing tight end for a number of years for the Titans. I think maybe the Lions in there as well. He's a former defensive lineman at Iowa, turned tight end. So it is possible to make that transition at the pro level. But quarterback to tight end, can you think of any examples of pro tight ends who were quarterbacks in high school?
Well, they tried to do it with Tim Tebow.
They tried, but
they tried.
Terrell Pryor played receiver, right?
Yeah, he did.
And
but he
then
mostly played quarterback.
But he played. Didn't he play receiver in the league as well?
Yeah, he did.
Who was the other Ohio State quarterback that came right after Terrell Pryor that played receiver?
Braxton Miller.
Braxton Miller. He's the guy that always doesn't. Don't you feel like he's the forgotten man? Like, wasn't he a Heisman finalist, or did he win the Heisman?
He did not win the Heisman, but
he was a Heisman finalist.
He was all the way through that. He was the Big Ten Player of the Year twice. Yeah, he had to go through that transition from Tressel into Urban Meyer and played that season in which his last starting season was the season they were ineligible and they went undefeated. And then, his last season would have been, 2013. No, he did play in 2014. So he played on a national championship team.
And whatever happened with his NFL career? Do you remember?
He went to the Texans and didn't do much.
That's interesting because he was a really good athlete.
Yeah.
He was 5th in Heisman voting in 12 and 9th in Heisman voting in 13. He was, let's see here. This is his college stats. His pro stats, all-time 34 receptions, 261 yards. Yeah. So apparently played with the Texans and the Eagles.
Okay.
Interesting. Hey, what's Cardale Jones doing right now? He's still in the league?
Who knows? I think he's in Columbus somewhere making podcasts or whatever.
Really?
Anybody can do a podcast if you've been a player of any sort. One thing we will discuss during the off season would be, I saw the stat during the broadcast of the game. I don't know if you went back and watched the broadcast, but Iowa last in the nation in explosive play percentage.
Explosive play percentage. Is that
the number of plays that are explosive plays? Yeah, explosive play percentage. It was like 11%.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I can see that a little bit. They had a couple explosives on Saturday. That surprised me that you said last in the nation?
Last in the FBS.
Yeah, that surprises me. I mean, that just surprises me that you can be 8-4 and produce. I mean, they points per game. What was their final points per game, Mark?
It's pretty good after this 40 spot.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like that. And it's not like they produced a ton of defensive scores this year. They produced, 60th in the country in points per game, 29 points per game. And they ended up 45th in the country in rush offense.
Okay.
But the difference is they didn't have Caleb Johnson. So last year they were much better in explosive plays because he just broke off a bunch of runs. They were more consistent throughout that running back room with Moulton, with Jazz Patterson, with Xavier Williams. We even saw Terrell Washington get some time on Saturday, but they were not as explosive. And that's again the passing game. That's what's going to keep him up at night. And I made the comment last week. Lester's got to get. I said it post game. Lester has to get this passing game moving next year, or he's on the hot seat. This is just business. This is how it is. I mean, I liked Tim Lester a lot, but here we go into year 3. The offense is substantially better. The pass offense is better, but not substantially better. He has got to resurrect this pass offense, and it has to be next year. And I don't want to hear an excuse about, well, they only had Gronowski for 1 year. No, this is what every team is dealing with now. You got to go in the portal. You got to next guy in. You've got to figure out a way to produce better through the air next year. Last year, you could say he didn't have enough of his own guys. This year, he got more of his own guys. Next year, he's going to have almost all of his own guys. It's time to put your money where your mouth is. And so that's what I'll say about Tim Lester. Got a lot of respect for him. Love it for him. I love the opportunity for him. I want him to be able to succeed. But offensive coordinators do not get 5, 6, 7 years. Look, we can't all be Michael Locksley. All right, we cannot all be Michael Locksley. There is a ticking clock with assistant coaches, and I don't know. Next year we've looked at the schedule. Mark, have you glanced at the Iowa schedule for 26?
I have not, but while you're looking that up, this is a guy that we've talked about so much, and he finally gets the axe at Kentucky.
Yeah.
So obviously it's not going to work out in terms of any kind of timing as a head coach, but Mark Stoops.
What's he gonna bring to Iowa? Your implication is that maybe he could be brought into Iowa. I don't know what he would bring.
This is the implication from Hawkeye Howard. I'm just bringing it up because obviously this is a guy that we have touted as a possible candidate to replace Kirk.
I suppose if Phil Parker shocked the world and says tomorrow that he's retiring before Kirk, or maybe Pat Fitzgerald lures him back home to Michigan State, wouldn't that be something? Then yeah, maybe Mark Stoops is a coordinator, defensive coordinator candidate.
So you think Kirk Ferentz and Phil Parker will step down together at the same time?
I would think so.
Okay.
I would think so. First of all, I can't imagine Parker leaving before Kirk. I was kind of just tongue in cheek on that comment. And I just have a hard time because I don't think Kirk is stepping down. Although I will say this, I thought it was really interesting. He was bawling as he was running off the field on Saturday. Kirk was. Now he cries about everything now. I mean, that's just how he is now. He's become, I'm not ripping him for it. He cries basically on everything. And this can sound really bad. I could get Kirk to cry in about 3 seconds. I could. No, I'm serious. And it's not that I'm going to do that. I'm not trying to get him to cry, but I could just ask him something about his players or ask him about, how do you summarize the stick-to-itiveness of this group? He'd immediately start crying. That's just how he is. He's very emotional. He loves his guys. That's the stage of life that he's in. And again, I'm not being critical of it. He was bawling as he was running off the field on Saturday. And it did make me think. I'm like, as I'm watching him run off the field, I'm like, was that his last Big Ten game? I don't have any reason to think that. But I don't think he's going to go on some, exit tour when he decides to hang it up. My guess is he'll announce it, kind of like Hayden Fry. Although Hayden Fry, people saw the writing on the door, given where that program had gone and unfortunately his health. But yeah, Kirk he gets if you watch him in his interviews, he'll cry after almost every win. I mean, he just does. That's just how he is. I don't know of any other coach that's like that. And some people may say that's really refreshing. I don't have an issue with it. Some may say he's a softie and he's not cut out to win big and whatever. I don't buy that.
No, I don't buy that either. I think he's at a disadvantage against the teams that have the personnel to win. If he had a team like that, I'm sure that he would. He's a good enough coach. What I was going to get at is after they lost their second game, do you recall anyone asking him about being knocked out of the playoff or after they lost their third game? Because I'm not knocking him for this, but I'm just curious. Does Kirk Ferentz, after they lose a third game, obviously he's a smart guy, so I'm not saying intellectually, but does it connect with him? We're missing the playoffs, and that he goes to work the next day and he just, at least for a few minutes, sits there and thinks, wow, or it's just, we just go on, we just continue to do what we do. We go to practice and everything's exactly the same.
I think what I just explained with his emotions says he's human. And so I think just because he's human, yeah, I would assume he absolutely recognizes that, probably does think about it. But I think that the incredibly valuable skill that he gives to a team that sits at 6-3 or 6-4, which is what they were after the USC loss, the skill that he brings to the table is he doesn't show it. So his players don't perceive that he has lost some zip, some flair with his coaching. His message remains the same. And I think that's probably why, if you talk to him and asked him, why don't you promote playoff success and national title success? Because people have complained about that, right? Some of your callers, Erica being one that I know calls in and doesn't like the fact that it doesn't seem like Iowa talks about those goals. And so I think that's probably fair. I think it's very rare that Kirk uses the word playoff to his team, unless he's saying we're not worrying about the playoff. And I think part of that is because he believes that if he does that, then he's setting his team up for potential failure if they don't reach that. So I get it. I get both sides of that. I mean, I think maybe there's probably a belief there that he doesn't have to preach it. He knows those players are smart enough to know that once they hit 3 or 4 losses, they're out of the race. They know what they have to do. They're smart individuals to be able to experience national success. He doesn't need to preach it, because if he preaches it and then they don't get there, they may stop believing. And all of a sudden, an 8-4 season like what this year could have turned into 6-6.
Yeah, it half impresses me, but it half bothers me is not the right term, because I don't really care. I'm not invested in it, but the again, the perception, it's just a perception that he just goes along the process. And the process is, this is how we develop players. This is how we recruit. This is how we feed them, train them. Everything is down to just, this is the process. This is how they lift weights. It's how we watch film. And the record just is the record. And however that falls, if we're 5-7, if we're 9-3, whatever it is, that's just the result of us working, and whatever officials make whatever calls or tipped passes that blew games, whatever. It's just kind of, we did what we do, and we did the best we could.
I'm in no position on a general scale to be giving Kirk advice about how to carry himself. But if I could give advice, my one recommendation to him, as it relates to what you just said, to inspire maybe a little bit more confidence with those that are frustrated by what you just explained, would be, is it possible that you could, at least in the off season, and when you're talking about your program as a whole, do what a lot of coaches do, like Ben McCollum for Iowa men's basketball is doing, and just say, hey, we're here to win Big Ten titles and compete for national championships and playoff success. That's the one thing I think you could do, and still, once the rubber hits the road, still keep it locked one game at a time and never bring it up again. I think it's those big overarching conversations, general conversations, lack of general statements that he makes about that make me kind of like, I wish he would. I wish he would bring that up. So that's why I've, in the past, I brought it up to Cade McNamara. I remember at one of the media days, well, I guess his 2 media days that he was there. I remember bringing him, that question up to him. Do you guys believe you can, get to the playoff? And yeah, he was locked into that, but he was also part of a Michigan program that I'm sure preaches it all the time. Because if they don't get to the playoffs, I would think that's a disappointment.
Because human nature tells me, and my own life experience and what I know about competitive sports at that level tells me, that there is no way you can be as successful as they are. And I know that when I say that, certain people, if they hear this, that are disconnected and they're from other fan bases, think, oh, well, they're really not that successful. Yes, they are. Yes, they are that successful. They're that successful at this level and produce that many NFL players. There has to be a drive there to be the best. You can't be that successful and that competitive. It's just suppressed and refrained, I guess, outwardly to the public.
Yeah. Yeah. That's probably fair. Yeah. I mean, I think there are probably things said behind closed doors, but I think it is kept to a minimum. That's my guess. I think it's kept to a minimum in season, out of season. And again, I don't think there'd be any harm in being a little bit more verbose. Is that the word I'm looking for? It's
a good word.
With the out of season lingo, verbiage. I hope, here's what I hope as we hit the 5 o'clock hour here. I hope that they get a opponent in the playoffs, or in the playoffs, in the bowl game that is somewhat whole. I just hope they get somebody, because here's what's going to happen. They're likely going to get a ranked team because they're going to get somebody out of the SEC down at the Citrus Bowl or at the ReliaQuest Bowl. And I hope that they get somebody who's at least halfway whole, because if they don't, even if they beat them, people are going to totally, not the Cyhawk C monies of the world that's in the chat, but there's going to be people who totally ignore that win and basically use that as ammunition against Iowa's inability to beat ranked teams. When that streak continues, even as close as they came this year. We had people in our postgame shows this year, Mark, basically telling me, I am sick and tired of this. We've lost to how many straight ranked teams? And my perspective on that is, what you say is not wrong, but can we just try to look at each end? This is not like what they were doing 2 to 3 years ago. Do you expect Iowa to just all of a sudden go from getting blown out to really good teams to just beating them in 1 or 2 years? The gap was pretty big if you look at the individual results for a lot of those top 25 losses. And now it's not. It's shrunk. So that tells me there's been really good progress made. So are we really going to say I'm ready to throw the towel in because they're still not doing it? Let's see what they do next year. I just pulled up their schedule. They get Ohio State and Kinnick. They get Michigan on the road. They get Washington on the road. I think it's a very similar schedule as a whole to what they had this year. Like, if I'm just looking at it right now, we don't know how the portal's all going to shake up. But I actually think level of difficulty is very balanced if you compare this year to next year. Preseason, we thought Penn State was going to be a lot better. So maybe I'd even say on paper, it's a little bit more favorable. But again, they do get that road game against Michigan, but they get Ohio State at home. They get at Illinois. I don't know what to make of the Illini. A couple of months ago, I'd have said that was going to be a really difficult game. And it will still be challenging, but boy, they kind of collapsed down the stretch of the year. At Washington's going to be a really difficult game. Every game is difficult in this league. At Northwestern, they get next year. They get at Minnesota. Purdue, they get Purdue. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. The only thing that could be better is if Maryland was on the schedule. Unfortunately, they're not. But they get Purdue at home. So, and then Wisconsin at home. I don't remember heading into this year saying that in the Big Ten, they have 2 almost sure wins. But at this point, I would say, I know nothing is sure, but at this point, I would say Purdue at home and Wisconsin at home are almost sure victories.
Yeah. I will mention as we take it to the Big Ten show. So, folks, we go directly from here every Tuesday over to the main channel and we talk Big Ten football. And of course, there's so much to talk about. So please join us there. Corey, is there anything that you want to hit before we shut it down on the Hawkeyes?
Signing day tomorrow. I'll be live from 3:30 p.m. Central Time until at least 5:45 Central. So tune over to From the Hawkeye of the Storm. We'll have, as always, we do this every year, live breakdown of the class and also some interviews, live interviews from Iowa's 26 recruiting class, which is signing tomorrow. So a lot of really good recruits in there, including a new quarterback. Got a couple of really promising linebackers. Julian Manson's on the list, son of former Hawkeye QB Jason Manson, who's on the staff. So they got some really promising prospects in there. So signing day, I wish it came later in December, Mark. I hate the fact that it's right after rivalry weekend and before championship week. It doesn't make any sense to me when you have teams like Ohio State and Indiana preparing for a Big Ten championship game. Why on earth do we need signing day to be right smack dab in the middle of that week? So pointless, so stupid. But it is what it is. I'm assuming those coaches are going to hold press conferences, following signing day. What a ridiculous thing to make them do. But the calendar's all messed up. But we'll be live for that tomorrow. No post game tonight for Iowa, Michigan State. But I'll have some reaction to that game as well. It starts at 6.
All right, folks, the Big Ten Live show is coming up next. We'll see you in 2.